Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We were all meant to shine as children do. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others.
Welcome to Successful Dropout. This podcast is for the outliers, the innovators, the rebels, those that dare to dream and act on their dreams. I'm your host, Kylan Ginger. Join me as we find out what it takes to drop out, grind, and succeed. What is up, Successful Dropouts? Get stoked because today on the show we have Jake Ducey. At 25 years old, Jake is a two-time published author with Penguin Random House, which is the #1 publisher in the world, by the way. He's backpacked around the world. He's given TED Talks. He's toured with Vans Warped Tour in 2015 as their very first inspirational speaker, appearing in front of over 500,000 millennials and their parents. And most importantly to him, during that tour, Jake helped the nonprofit Feed Our Children Now raise over 345,000 pounds worth of food. And of course, he's also a dropout, and I'm stoked to hear his story. So Jake, man, that's the intro I have for you, but tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, man, I mean, you hit it right on the head. I think we can all relate to feeling like we're meant for something more in life. And obviously that's something similar to that is what pulled you to even start this show, right? And
oh, yeah.
I think everyone listening to feels, especially if you're listening to a show called Successful Dropout, you feel like you're meant for something more. That doesn't necessarily mean you need to drop out of college, but for me, it was having that feeling and that question. As a 19-year-old, I was in economics class, and we were studying economics, and I wanted to know why we couldn't audit the Federal Reserve, who prints and controls American money. It seems like a legitimate question in an economics class, given that we're inheriting these economic problems from previous generations. But he and I got in an argument over it, and he wanted me to memorize the textbook, and the rest of the class just wanted to memorize the textbook. And I realized it wasn't a conducive place for my learning, which led me to save up a few $1,000s, vagabond backpack around the world, which led to a self-published book, which ended up selling really well. When it sold its first 10,000 copies, then I got a publishing contract with Penguin Random House for a couple more books. So been written a few books, and what I do a lot of, going to Australia in May. I'm running workshops and seminars throughout the country for a month. Going to do that in Canada in July. Just ran one in San Diego. So I run a lot of my own live events. And the intention is really just in hopes that I think we're capable of a lot more than we think we are. Winston Churchill says if people did what they were actually capable of doing, they would astonish themselves. And I think we have a lot of limitations, either consciously or unconsciously, that I invite everyone to question, and that's what my work's about.
Totally, man. And you're obviously living proof of that, 25 and having accomplished all this. Let me ask you a question. How long did it take you to grow out those luscious locks of hair?
Long time, but, I've cut it. This isn't a straight grow job. This has been trimmed quite a few times. But if this were a show on how to successfully grow long hair as a male, I'd recommend that you let it grow for about 3 years, but do some really small trims on it because it'll help it grow faster.
I love it, man. I've tried it a couple times. I'll get it about, mid-ear or so, and it just, I don't know. I can't make it through that awkward phase. But for those of you who aren't seeing the screen right now, you can go look at a picture of him later, but he's just got great long hair. I appreciate that. So you were in studying for business, some sort of business school or something like that?
I just thought I was just going to do business and economics like like what everyone says.
Did you want to be an entrepreneur or like get your MBA?
I didn't even know what I wanted to do. I had no idea. I was a first team All San Diego basketball player. We were one of the top teams in San Diego. We were ranked in the state. We were really good. And I was captain, first team All San Diego basketball player, led San Diego in 3-point shooting my senior year. I was just jock, and I had offers to play basketball in college, and I knew I wasn't going to go to the NBA, but like I was good enough to play in college and, get the opportunity to, basically use sports as a way to, get a good degree or whatever, So
Right.
I thought I would do that. And then in my TED talk, I say, I thought I'd do that and then get go sell something for some company I didn't care about. And I'll eventually get a gold watch and a nice house after I, gamble on the biggest risk of all, which is one day I'll finally have the money to do what I want to do with my life, which is what most people do, only to find out 9 out of 10 people die with less than $10,000, no financial assets. About 90% of people come retirement depend not only on Social Security, but also on their children and family in order to support them. So, obviously the traditional wrap isn't working as well as we think, given the amount of also debt most people live in and stuff like that. So, that was who I was, I guess, in a former life. I was never a great student or anything like that. And I just got, sports is really what just kind of, I think, kept me from, veering too far off the path as a kid and just kind of centered me,
Yeah. So what made you decide to backpack then? Is that the first thing you did after you dropped out?
That's what I did immediately. Yeah. What was the alternative? I realized it wasn't a conducive place for me to learn. I know people that have got a lot of value out of school. My brother has a degree in business, and my brother is very, very, very successful. He's $1 million company, and he, benefited from it. But for me, it was like, what else was I going to do? I wanted to write. I had a few $1,000s saved. I figured I'd go travel, and eventually I'd write about it, So it wasn't really, I had nothing to lose. I think a lot of times in Stoic philosophy, they talk about what's the worst thing that could happen and to actually genuinely examine it and then see if the risk is worth taking thereafter. And in the positive thought movement, that can get dismissed a lot. But if you objectively look at the worst that could happen, it's generally not as bad as you think. If you're watching Successful Dropout, I imagine you're not like 40, 50, 60 years old. Although you may, but I imagine it's younger people. Right. And you really don't have much to lose when I was 19 years old, It's like, I'll just go back to school if it doesn't work out, or just, whatever.
Totally. So you mentioned Stoicism. Have you read Seneca's Letters?
I have that. Yeah. It's great.
Yeah, I just started reading it like a month ago, and it's great. So I'm just curious. Do you actually? I know in one of his letters, I don't remember which one, but he talks about the practice of actually taking a few days out of a certain season to live on on just rice and beans and kind of experience the worst case scenario, I guess. Do you do that at all?
I mean, that's how I got my career off the ground.
Is that?
I remember an early interview, and you could find it online. I think it was with a company called Share the Stoke. It was like they were kind of in the surf scene, and she asked me my advice, and I said, get used to eating rice and beans. I remember one time my girlfriend came back. She was gone. We used to live in LA. I live in San Diego now, and she came back. And the only thing in the house was I bought a 20-pound bag of rice, and we had beans, and I had a guy that lived in with me that would help me. And we just ate the same thing every She was like, what? And part of it was probably because we were also just we didn't even want to go take an hour and a half to go to the store in the first place. But
yeah, man, I love it. There's such an importance in that, and it's something I want to try at some point. Again, if you're listening to this, maybe try that for a day or maybe 2 days, just kind of wear the same clothes, don't wash your clothes, eat just rice and beans, drink just water, maybe sleep on the floor. And the way Seneca talks about it, he says, do these things all the while asking yourself, is this what I'm actually afraid of? Is this the worst that, it can get? And you'll find it's really not that bad. And you're still able to find happiness and fulfillment.
Viktor Frankl, right? He wrote that book, Man's Search for Meaning, and he was in Auschwitz, Nazi concentration camps, arguably the worst concentration camp. He survived and would eat. They wouldn't even have vegetables in their soup. It was just pure broth. They'd do manual labor for 10 hours a day, shoveling snow and 6 feet of snow with boots that had holes in them, and their feet are blistering. He's watching people keel over or die in front of him, and he's like, yeah, I had spiritual freedom during that time. Like, okay. And then we're like afraid, to just like, we're afraid of what our parents think of us. Like, and he's like doing that.
Oh man, Man's Search for Meaning, guys. If we'll put that in the show notes too. If you haven't read it, I would read that. It just, anything like that can give you a broader perspective on life. It's like gold. Jake, do you have any crazy stories you can tell us from your travels? Like how long were you backpacking?
I went for about 6 months, yeah. And
it's a long time.
Well, the thing that, might be relevant is I have a little different viewpoint on traveling. I think most people have destination addiction, and they think that they'll find their purpose or they'll find freedom when they get enough stamps on their passport or they go to another country, but really they're running from themselves. And I see it all the time. I mean, I have people come to my workshops, and that's like, they come and like, this is what I'm doing. I'm going to go travel. And by the end, they're crying and they're like, I'm running away from my life. And that happens a lot. Not to say traveling's bad or something like that, because it's not. You can learn a lot. I learned a lot. But I eventually realized I had no purpose in what I was doing. I was just meandering. Fortunately for me, or fortunately, because it makes for a good story, so it's actually benefited me. When I was in Indonesia, I lost my wallet, and then these guys that were just the locals, I befriended them, and they took me to their island, Lombok, and we were hiking. And it's like, when you're in Lombok, of all places, when you're in like Ubud in the rainforest, right near the capital of Bali, there's paved trails when you're hiking. There are in Ubud. But when you're like out in the middle of nowhere in Lombok, it's not like America. There's not like paved trails. You're climbing rocks in the middle of nowhere, and there's no like, here's the trail and here isn't the trail. It doesn't exist. You're in the middle of nature, and you can't see any buildings. And so I was out there doing that, and it was pouring rain, and I slipped off rock, and I fell like 12 feet, and I saw my whole life flash before my eyes, and I, by, whatever miracle, whatever people believe in, grace, God, accident, chance, it doesn't matter whether you're an atheist or spiritual or religious. It's just by some force of nature, I didn't die, and I didn't hit my head. I landed on my side, and I got creviced in between these rocks, and I was stuck down there, and eventually I kind of come to consciousness more out of shock than I didn't hit my head and get knocked out. And when I rolled over, one of the guys I was with named Ari jumped after me, and I started just crying because I didn't even know this guy. And like, it's just jumping down like the side of like a big cliff, and he jumped out, and I started crying on the spot. Because I always say, besides my mom birthing me, it was the most heroic thing that ever happened to me, but I don't remember my mom birthing me, so technically this was. And and I realized, like, what am I doing? They were able to save me. And it shook me up more out of the sense of, like, what am I doing? Like, if it was just an inch another way, you could just, you conk your head and you're dead, and it's not like there's a hospital 5 minutes away or something,
Right.
Yeah, man, I realized that I was aimlessly traveling, and I had this dream to come back and do the work that I do, write my books and be a teacher essentially. And I realized like I was almost scared of doing that. So I was just kept postponing. And I see people do that all the time. Even they try to do what I do, and they'll do it for 6 months or a year and a half, and it doesn't happen as quickly. So they take the little money that they have and they leave and they go travel. Gone, never see, you never see you again. You'll probably just, half-ass it for the rest of your life, and that's cool. But like, people have amazing messages or gifts or dreams to start their business or build some idea or to just like create a better life for their family, and often we get scared of facing that, and we use destination addiction as a way to not have to deal with that fear.
Yeah. That's fascinating, man. So you mentioned that, the people that come to your workshops, and you see that a lot, people kind of running away from their fears and running away from what they know they really want, they really desire to do. What would you say is the number one piece of advice you're giving people to start to break that habit? What's kind of the process there?
Well, I always say brainwash yourself before the world brainwashes you. And so like, a lot of the fear that stops us is unconscious. So I'm really into like real psychology and human behavior. You have 65,000 thoughts in a day, approximately. And really? 95% of them are unconscious. So they're coming from your subconscious mind. You have a conscious mind, which is like, I'm like, hey, your name's Billy. And you're like, no, it's not. And I'm like, the sky's red. And you're like, no, it's not. It's your ability to accept or reject information. It's your conscious, rational mind. But then you have a subconscious mind. You have an unconscious aspect of yourself. That's why you don't remember the 65,000 thoughts that you have. You probably remember like 12. Like, I don't remember like 9 of them. I remember like, like we don't remember much of our thoughts because so much of it is autopilot happening. It's like the human psyche is like an iceberg, that analogy, tip of the iceberg, but there's a whole bunch underneath. There's a whole unconscious aspect of you. And, that is largely programmed negatively, unless you were some like rarely, bred in a lab, because we're always infested with negativity from all the ads that we face. Everything is designed so that we feel insecure to buy things, let alone we receive all this social conditioning from our teachers and our parents. A lot of them didn't make the money they could have made, and money was often a fear, and that's all going into you subconsciously. So a lot of the fear that stops us is we're controlled subconsciously. So I record my own hypnosises and I listen to them 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes at night that just tell me about my success. I've been doing it for almost 3 years.
Well, what does that mean exactly?
Well, I give it away for free now. It's just jakeshypnosis.com. Everyone can try it. But what it is I recorded I got GarageBand. Like, I don't know what you record or edit the podcast on GarageBand. Obviously, everyone's probably pretty, millennial generation that listens to this. So everyone knows what GarageBand is. It's an audio recording and editing app, kind of like iMovie, but for audio. And I set up a microphone and I just got a nice background noise and I put the MP3 down and then I recorded a hypnosis that's different thoughts than the subliminal thoughts we always tell ourselves. Most people's is, I'm not good enough. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough resources. I'll probably fail at this. That's most people's thoughts. Mine are, I'm so happy and grateful now that money comes to me in increasing quantities from many sources on a continuous basis. I give my talents with love. I meet wonderful people everywhere I go. I program my mind that way unconsciously. And when you change the unconscious programming, you unlock the code to your potential. And, a lot of what stops us is unconscious. Just think about it. Like, people get in relationships and the person that every time the relationship ends at 3 or 6 months because they sabotage it unconsciously, or they're scared of intimacy. Like this girl I used to date, ever since like freshman year of high school, I grew up with her. It's always relationships are over at 3 or 6 months. Like that happens a lot in relationships. It's an unconscious way we sabotage it, or we push intimacy away because maybe our parents got divorced, so we associate relationships with pain, or they, stuff happened with money and we saw them arguing. So then we have like some type of weird complex about money. It happens in relationships. It happens in every area of our lives. So when you control the programming, then you can reclaim your life. I forget what the question was, but it's just what I'm really fascinated by. And that's it in practical terms. So I listen to that every morning and every night as a way to feed my brain before the world brainwashes me.
Yeah. Oh man, that's so great. And again, the question was, what do you tell people to start to break that habit?
The very first thing I say is listen to I say, here's a link. Get this. It's free. You just download it off my website, jakeshypnosis.com. Listen to it for 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes at night. And during those 30 minutes, don't think about what you don't want. Only think about what you do want. And spend all of your time imagining your future and getting emotionally involved in it. And give yourself that free space, 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes at night. And just see what happens. Just that alone will make a huge difference. And I see it. I've seen it in hundreds of people's lives since I started letting people download it. Because I got great results. It started with then my girlfriend tried it, and then then I was like, I'd give my clients it. Then I just put it up. Now it's just like, here, grab it. It's just Jake's Hypnosis. Because unless you do that, we're always the voice from your parents saying don't do that always speaks in your head louder than your intuition.
Now, Jake, you said something. You said just a couple of sentences ago, don't think about what you don't want. Well, why not? Explain that a little bit more.
Well, you should think about it, obviously, to a degree. Obviously, I said examine the worst case scenario. But after that, what are you doing? It's not helping you to just keep thinking about it, but we do that all the time. Like this woman wrote me on Facebook last night, and she had found one of my videos and wrote me and had some questions or something. And but all she did, she asked questions, but then it was this really long email that was just everything she didn't want. And then this is happening, then this is happening, and then this is happening. Yeah. And it was just this laundry list, and I just wrote her back 2 lines and I said, hi, thanks for writing me. Please listen to this hypnosis, jakeshypnosis.com. for 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes at night, and don't think about what you don't want, and then let me know how that goes. Because we're addicted to negativity in our culture, and we know that because they've also done studies to see what's the most viral content, and it's negative and angry comment, somebody getting hit in the head with a box out of nowhere. We're addicted to seeing other people get knocked on their butt and negative content. And it is the most viral content. So
it's so true, man. Those are some of the most popular YouTube videos. I look those up all the time too.
Yeah.
And all the news we're hearing today, it's people are meeting in the newsroom. What story should we cover today? Whatever ones scare people the most. Let's go with that.
Yeah. Well, they're trying to make money. That's how their business is, and the way they make money is by the most people that click to the website. Because if more people click on the website, it doesn't matter if the headline is a lie or they don't even read it. As long as they get the click, they can go show advertisers more people clicked. So we're addicted to this negativity and focusing on the worst. And it's important to examine the worst that could happen, but thereafter, we have to protect our peace of mind, especially if you're trying to go against the grain and create something of your, that is in your highest values that other people don't agree with, out of love. Usually they don't agree with you out of love, like family and friends and parents or whatever.
It's interesting. Something I think you're getting at that I learned a while ago. For those of you listening, it can be really tempting to. There's a difference between affirmations and saying what you don't want. It can be really tempting to say things like, I don't want to be poor. I don't want to be poor. And by saying that, you think okay, maybe I can avoid being poor. And that's just an example. If I keep saying that over and over again, but you're saying kind of the negative version of it, which is, I think, what you were getting at, which is, don't think about what you don't want, because you're still thinking of the negative version of it, versus if you say something like what you just said, whatever it was, wealth flows to me from many different sources, that sort of thing. If that makes sense to those of you listening.
Well, every thought is a biochemical reaction in your brain that influences your nervous system that affects you on a physiological level. So every thought that you're thinking, most of which are unconscious, or more specifically, every perception that you hold on your reality is affecting you chemically. And it's producing chemicals of stress, fear, and worry, or openness and expansiveness or tension. Tension is going to lower your creativity. It's going to lower your opportunity. You're going to have a more negative outlook. Every thought and belief you think creates a chemical reaction.
Huh. Have you read the book As a Man Thinketh?
I have read that before. Yeah, it's a good book.
Yeah, I would suggest that one too, right along the same line. And it's really short. I have it on Audible. It's like an hour long, and I've probably listened to it 10 times because it's I can go through it in like 2 days by just turning it on periodically. I'll actually turn it on in the shower. I'll point the speaker towards the shower, turn it on, and it's that one concept, as a man thinketh, so he becomes, or a woman too, of course. I want to get into after you traveled. So you had this fall, you thought maybe I'm just running away from what I really want to do, which was, speak and inspire and author. What happened next? When did you start writing your book?
On the plane home, it's like an 18-hour plane
ride.
Right
away.
So right away. Yeah, literally right away. And I knew, like, this is a short window. You can't, don't goof this up or else you're going to go back to school or you're going to have to quit on this here pretty soon. So I went full in, I wrote the book pretty damn fast and tried to push it to publishers, spent a lot of time on that, and no one would take it. So I self-published and, filled my car up with books. I started selling at farmers markets. Speaking of successful dropout, you'll like this one. So I did all types of stuff like that, but I rented a table from the University of Oregon's Student Center at Eugene, and I rented a table as a vendor. And on a school day, I set the table up in the center of campus in the most highly trafficked walk area while kids are going to class in the center of campus. And I stopped people and I sold my books to people. So like that's the stuff that I did to answer your question when I came back.
That's so great. I love that story. And again, funny. This was Into the Wind.
Yeah, that was Into the Wind. That was the first book. Yeah.
So give us a quick synopsis on that. What's that book about?
Well, it's about what we were just discussing. It actually starts in economics class. I told you that is actually what happened. I asked my teacher why we can't audit the Federal Reserve. It's how the book starts. We argued in class. It's literally the first scene of the book. Is me, I think the very first thing that I say is why can't we audit the Federal Reserve? It's like the second line of the book. And then it goes through my journey of leaving and ending in Thailand with, after falling off the cliff in Indonesia, and it ends right there.
Awesome. And then you have a second book out now, right? The Purpose Principles?
Yeah, I got another one out. I have 3 out. Purpose Principles was the first book Penguin Random House picked up, which came out, I think 2 years ago. And then I had one come out just a couple months ago, or 2017. So it was last year, 2016, it came out.
Oh, wow. Which one is that?
That's called Profit from Happiness. That was with Penguin too.
Profit from Happiness. Okay. Out of curiosity, because we've had Jake Heilbrunn on the show, and I just think it'd be interesting. Do you have any, for anybody listening who desires to write a book, I guess, do you have any tips on how to do that? Maybe how to pick a subject and just the basics of getting it on paper?
Well, don't pick a subject out of what sells, because if you pick a subject out of what sells, it's an arduous undertaking to write a book. So you want to make sure you are passionate about it. But I would say, don't be a dummy. I think a lot of people think their book's going to sell for them, and it doesn't. It's 95% of books sell less than 250 copies. So it's way even harder than making it as a musician, making it as an author today. It's harder than a musician. And a lot of people don't look at it properly, and they abort their other job or something, and then in 6 months they're gone or something like that. So
right.
Make sure you're passionate about it. And I mean, if your question is specifically on how to write it, I would suggest you look above the screen. don't look at the screen and learn how to type without looking at what you're typing, because otherwise there's a high chance you'll keep erasing everything you type. You want to, be able to tap into the flow of thought, or else it's going to be you see people all the time. They're like, yeah, I'm writing my book. Like, when'd you start writing it? 3 years ago. I hear that all the time. I'm like, really? It took you 3 years to write it? And it's just because people just like erase what they type and they get in their head about it. So, you want to be able to do it in an efficient manner. Obviously, don't rush it.
Yeah,
but
love it.
I think looking above the screen is really valuable, and I think it's a great analogy for the rest of life too. What's that?
Awesome. Sorry, you cut out for a second. That's why I started talking. I didn't mean to interrupt you. But no, that's great. I just want to throw that out there for anybody listening, because I know I've gotten a couple people that emailed and wanted to find out a little more information about. I think I have a great story. How do I write a book?
Yeah, I have a course with Udemy. I don't know. It's just one of those like $20 courses or whatever with Udemy.
Oh, sweet.
It's called I forget what it's called, but if you type in my name, Jake Ducey, on udemy.com, or if you go to my website, jakeducey.com, I think there's a link to it on my blog. It's just I even have my agent on who was the original and still is the agent for the Dummy series books. Eckhart Tolle, Neil Donald Walsh. He did all the Dummy series books. He owns one of the top agencies in the world, and he came on for probably an hour, 2 hours, and gave advice to authors. So it's it's a really good. It's a lot of good information in there, especially if you're trying to just start.
Yes, awesome. We'll link to the show notes there. Here on Successful Dropout, we like to talk about, the main reason you go to college is for the signal, that certification of this degree, this piece of paper that signals to the rest of the world that you're somehow now qualified to actually add value, real-time value to the world. And what we're finding now is that there are more and better ways to create that signal yourself. And honestly, authoring a book, even if it's a short ebook, is one of those. Starting building your personal brand, starting a website, your firstandlastname.com, a blog, a podcast. So this is all really good stuff for those of you listening. I heard a really great quote the other day, and I forget who it was by, but he said, if it's not online, it doesn't exist. And in today's day and age, it's kind of true. And so the more you can create and build online or on a place where future employers, people you come in contact with, can look and see, here's what you've done, here's what you've built, here's some real world value, the more, the more you're going to get out of it. Jake, tell us a story about what you would consider to be your worst entrepreneurial moment to date, if you have one.
I don't really have a worst. All this stuff, like I said, it makes a good story. Especially my job is essentially people hire me to tell good stories and to that's what a keynote speech is. So, and that's, if it's a good seminar, obviously you're telling stories that are entertaining people. So they're all great. They make great, talking fodder, but, I've had time, when I was starting, I had a lot of times nobody came to events. I did open mics, at coffee shops where musicians were going. And I did a motivational speech in the middle of it. No one listened to it. 4 people are there to begin with. And they're just what the hell is this guy doing? And they don't want to listen. And that happened a lot. I had workshops I ran at community centers and bookstores and cafes, and no one came. Definitely times where I drove 3-4 hours and I waited for an hour and no one ever came, so I left. Definitely that happened, for sure.
What would you say was kind of your first major success, when you thought, hey, I think I'm doing it, Probably the first day I sold 70 books in one day at a farmer's market. I made almost $1,000 in one day selling books at a farmer's market one day. I had strong coffee that day, and instead of standing behind my table, I stood in the center of the walkway
and I talked to every single person that went by, and I was just like, I drank really strong caffeine, and I talked to everyone, and I probably only like 3 people that whole day said no to me probably, and I sold like that's a lot of books to sell, especially at a farmer's market. So that was I was like 20 then, so that was like probably within my first couple of months of having the book. And that was when I was like, and it was a lot. I was like, damn, dude, I'd like to this cash, not knowing how low of an amount of money that is anyways. But that was a huge first step. Like, damn, I could do this. And actually, I'm kind of good at selling and like stuff like that, or at least I could do it. I don't really, I don't enjoy sales necessarily, but I realized like, damn, I could actually go push this book for a year if I need to.
Huh. Now, Jake, I like asking this question. If you could time travel back to day one of your entrepreneurial journey and have 10 minutes with your former self to communicate any lessons you've acquired with the intention of saving yourself mistakes and heartache, what would you tell yourself?
I'd probably do 2 things. One, I'd tell myself patience. That's obvious, especially when you're young too. We're just not patient. Tony Robbins says we overestimate what we can accomplish in a year, and we underestimate what we can accomplish in a decade. And it's true. We overestimate how quickly we can move, or how quickly the world will move. We can always move pretty damn fast, but there are a lot of times where you're waiting on someone or something, and it just takes time to build, for your resume to build, or people to hear about you, or whatever, build a community, whatever it is. And so patience. And then I'd probably spend the rest of the time meditating with myself, just to demonstrate like, hey, you want to meditate now? And then we'd meditate for like 8 minutes together, which would be a cool painting if like the older version of me was meditating with the younger version of me. If anyone's a painter here and you make that and it's cool, I'll buy it off you if you email me. That'd be cool.
Awesome. Hey, somebody take him up on that. I want to see it too. I had forgotten. I wanted to ask you a couple questions about your last 2 books and just to see what they're about, and I forgot to do that. So the purpose principles, briefly, kind of what's that about for people listening?
That was my own, that's like a passion project. It's my first published book with Penguin Random House, which is the world's largest publisher, and basically the premise of it is, what are the common threads between some of the world's most successful and influential people today, and just things I was interested in, there's like 12 principles, and I have anything from stories from Brad Pitt to Jim Carrey to Taylor Swift to Bob Marley to Jay-Z to all types of them, and just like cool stories that obviously we don't learn in school, but we should learn in school, because if we learn these things, the whole reason stories and narratives have evolved or have existed for forever. Story is such an integral part of the human experience, is because we see ourselves and other people through story. So the purpose of the book is to see yourself in these people and be like, damn, I could do that shit. And when you realize that, then you develop enough, confidence or whatever to take the first step. So that's what that book is about. And the foreword is by the creator of Chicken Soup for the Soul series, Jack Canfield.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Really quick, what's one thing that is not taught in school right now that you think should? Like, it just baffles you?
Well, it depends. There's things that I think, but most people would disagree. One everyone should agree on is like, you should know how to pay your taxes in school. Like, that's just one that like a 50-year-old conservative people probably, I don't think everyone thinks that, that's just a silly one. I remember the first time I paid taxes, like, what the hell do I do? Yeah. So I think that, but obviously less ones would be how to make money or how to manage money. Would be really valuable. Imagine a financial management class when you're in school. That'd be crazy. Oh my God. Just even if it was basic things, like just teaching you like a basic math, where it was like Warren Buffett's net worth at 29 was this. Now at 70 years old, it's 9 billion. he made this much every year. What was the result of that? Is it A, taxes, B, compounding interest, C, having a good degree, or D, listening to his parents? The answer, B, compounding interest. Like something like that, that'd be valuable.
I love it, man. I don't want to hijack too much here, but on that subject, if there's any of you listening who are parents, or if you are still living with your parents, or you're going to be parents in the future, this is something my dad did, unfortunately, after I left the house, that he did with all my siblings. That was phenomenal on the subject of budgeting. He gave them all an allowance, but it was different than your typical allowance. He wouldn't pay for anything for them. They wouldn't pay for their clothes. It wouldn't pay for, any sort of entertainment. If they went out to eat, wouldn't pay for any of that. All they got was, if they lived at home, they got free food, 3 meals a day at home. Obviously, they got to live there and everything like that. Everything else, though, my siblings had to buy themselves, and my dad would give them an acceptable allowance, and they had to learn, and he sat down with them every month, and they budgeted that out for different categories. So, for instance, we had a couple horses, and my younger sister was in charge of those horses. Well, my dad didn't. She was in charge of buying all the feed for the horses and anything else they needed. So he would give her, a few $100s a month, and she would have to budget that. And if she doesn't, the horses don't get fed, right? On the flip side, she saved a lot of that money. She didn't buy clothes for a long time. She'd be frugal maybe when we went out to a restaurant, and she was able to buy her first car cash, and then my brother's probably going to hate this, but I remember one time he bought like a $150 airsoft gun, right? And then we went out to Olive Garden the next day, and he couldn't eat. He didn't have the money. I think my mom eventually convinced my dad to pay for him, and it was all. Yeah, right. My parents aren't abusive, all right, but it was just such interesting. And I want to just take that tangent really quick, because that was so valuable for my siblings, and I'm pretty good with money, but I did miss out on that. Awesome. And I'm going to do that with my kids. But your third book, what was that again? Profit from
Happiness is the name.
Oh, what's that about, really quick?
That book is about, I would call it a leadership book. It's about interpersonal skills as an entrepreneur that I've learned that have been valuable, that I've learned from other people that have been valuable to them. So there's some basic perception things around money, and then the rest of the book is around how to increase your value outside of the context of logging hours. So there's a section on listening, and there's a section on vulnerability, and there's a section on smiling, and there's a section on understanding that you're not paid for your time, you're paid for the value you bring for your time. So there's like some kind of interpersonal type of things like that. It's a sweet book too.
Yeah. Sounds like a great book to pick up, guys. We'll link to that in the show notes again. Moving kind of on to the lightning round here, what's a personal habit that contributes to the success you've achieved so far?
Oh, my hypnosis, for sure, dude. Literally, that is a huge thing, because you cannot overestimate how much that your subconscious mind controls your life. I have a client that when we started, she had made $250,000 a year almost every year. And I was like, for 10 years. And I was like, do you think that's strange that you always make the same amount of money? Do you work the exact same amount of hours to the T every single year or something? Like, how do you make the same every year? Do you think that's weird? She's like, no, you think about it, it's kind of weird. I was like, well, it's because you have a conditioned pattern in your subconscious mind that's what you're going to make, and you do it every single year. And that happens a lot. Like, I met this lady that said when she was 20 years old, she's like 55. She was 20 years old. She said, if I could just make $100,000 as an interior designer. And she said, I was talking to her about the subconscious mind. And she said she makes it every year. Like, some years it's 96, some years it's 92, some years it's 104. It's pretty much the same every year. And, so conditioning myself, setting a new governor on my mind of what's possible through my hypnosis is something that I think is really valuable. And that's why I just give it away for free. I think everyone can use it.
Do you read other people's material much? And if so, are there any other books you'd recommend to us?
Oh, I read a lot of books. This just came in the mail like an hour ago. It's Rental Property Investing.
Nice.
And I got another rental property book right here too, Millionaire Real Estate Investor. This one I was just thawing at between my things today. How to Get Rich, one of the world's greatest entrepreneurs shares his secret, by Felix Dennis, founder of Maxim Magazine. So these are I just finished a good book a couple days ago by John DeMartini that I loved. It was called How to Get to Heaven, How to Make One Hell of a Profit but Still Get to Heaven. It's not a religious book, but it's just a cool title. Like and it's about, how to grow your business. So I read a lot. I read a lot of different kinds of books. Obviously, I'm reading. I'm growing in I want to grow a lot in my understanding of wealth creation. So that hence these books on property investment. I got Benjamin Graham's book over there, The Intelligent Investor over there, which will probably come later because first I want to invest in real estate before the market at all. So I just kind of read what I want to learn about,
Awesome. Do you get 8 hours of sleep?
Often, yeah, pretty much. Sometimes, obviously, I don't, but my girlfriend and I pretty much get 8 hours of sleep every single night. Yeah, we probably got like more than 8 last night. Some nights it might be less, but we're generally at the latest we're in bed at 11. But generally we're in bed by 8 or 9 o'clock, and we're just reading in bed and fall asleep. Sometimes at 9, sometimes at 10. So I'm not like this crazy dude that's like hustle in 18 hours a day every day. I think it's so ridiculous. It's like, dude, get a life, So, and I think it's a bad thing to teach people is to work overnight. You don't need sleep. I don't think that's a healthy thing to teach someone. If the goal of personal development is to be a healthier person, I don't think that's very healthy.
I'm right with you, man. How much Netflix do you watch?
Not too much, man. Not too much. If I watch anything, I have NBA League Pass, and I'll catch a basketball game or something like that on my computer. Last game I watched was the Warriors Kings 2 nights ago. I think it was 2 nights ago. So I watched that. Like I said, I was into basketball, and I'm in just as good a shape as when I was playing in college. So I know I'm into that. So if I do something, it's probably more basketball than anything.
Sweet, man. Well, getting down to our last 2 questions here, what parting advice do you have for any of our listeners who are thinking of dropping out of college and kind of looking to forge an alternative path, but they haven't quite made that step yet? Any parting advice?
I mean, it's never a bad idea to start saving any money you can. The worst thing that happens is you have the money. So there's never actually been a bad idea as to not save, because the worst thing that happens is the money's in your bank account. So as much as you can, Sir John Templeton, which is one of the most famous investors ever, he's notorious for even beating the stock market during recessions, which is, 2 to 1 over most people during recessions. He's one of the most famous in the world. He saves 50% of his income, and he encourages people to do that. I haven't got to that point.
Did you say 50%?
50, yeah. He's one of the greatest investors ever. One of the smartest minds of money ever. But obviously, that's not always doable to start. But I think that's always a smart thing. Just give yourself some cushion if you are going to drop out. Obviously I don't recommend that you do that, and I never want to. I always recommend people to be conservative. You need to understand who you are too. Like if you're a risk adverse person, then it might not be a smart thing to do to just jump into it. Maybe take your time and slow yourself into it,
Yeah. Any parting advice for our listeners who have already dropped out and who are already on their entrepreneurial journey?
Study geometry, because that'll really help you. I'm just joking. Take a part-time geometry class. No.
I was really interested to hear the explanation behind that too. So.
I would say start saving, figure out what the hell you're going to do. Don't drop out and just be a lazy ass and, set low standards for the rest of your life, because you give the rest of us a bad wrath. So, no, just make sure that make sure you know where you're going, and if you don't know where you're going, make sure you're not, moving backwards, which a lot of people do, even whether they drop out or not. They move backwards a lot of times in life. Bad habits, unhealthy habits, never given any thought to the purpose of their goals. Write some goals down. What do you want to accomplish this year? What would make this year the most successful and fulfilling year ever? Write it on a piece of paper and start working on it whenever you can, and make some actionable steps, make some progress. Don't just sit around, obviously, which unfortunately happens to a lot of people when they, quit. They don't see anything in the system that excites them and they quit. And because there's no really alternatives, there's not like alternatives for people that don't want to be a doctor and like go study business, even though you'll never learn how to be an entrepreneur unless you go to like Wharton Business School or something, which you're probably not listening. You're probably not in Wharton if you're listening to Successful Dropout. But, just see where you can take steps and have a clear vision. And, the worst thing you can do, is do nothing. So try and read as much as you can, but apply what you're reading, because reading personal development books and listening to podcasts is pointless. You're just a mindless information consumer if you're not applying it.
Good word, man. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Oh, just my website. It's just jakeducey.com, JAKEDUCEY.com. You can just reach out to me there. Facebook is where I'm most active.
Awesome. Well, Successful Dropouts, you've been hanging out with Jake and Kylan today, learning what it takes to drop out, grind, and succeed. For everything we talked about today, head over to successfuldropout.com and type Jake into the search bar, and the show notes will pop right up. And as always, stay hungry, stay foolish, and cut.
Nice outro.
Hey, thanks.